Good evening, you are watching TKC Daily, where we make sense of the global events with straight facts and sharp analysis. Tonight on the show, we start with the biggest takeaways from the US-Ukraine 175 billion US dollars minerals deal. Has Trump and Zelensky got what they wanted? Meanwhile, President Donald Trump blames former US President Joe Biden for shrinking the US economy. We will tell you everything about this. Also on the show, Pakistan under fire as Human Rights Report exposes Pakistan's mishandling of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and Balochistan. And finally, Prime Minister Netanyahu declares national emergency amid Israel's worst wildfires in a decade. All this is lined up. Let's begin. If wars had a currency, it wouldn't just be bullets or tanks, it would be minerals. This week, a major shift happened in the Ukraine war narrative. And not on the battleground, but in the Washington, where both Ukraine and United States of America signed a long-delayed critical minerals deal. It's been called a new kind of support, one that blends economics, politics, and strategy into a single signed document. So let's break this down. Question 1. What's this deal all about? Under the agreement, the United States will get access to Ukraine's rare earth minerals, especially for everything from smartphones to missiles, in exchange for setting up a reconstruction investment fund in Ukraine itself. Now, try to understand that both countries will hold equal voting right over the fund, and Ukraine will retain full control over its natural resources, including the mining infrastructure and subsoil. That's a big deal, especially since these minerals have been largely untapped because of the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia. But there is more. Trump's administration had earlier demonstrated and demanded that Ukraine quote-unquote repay the billions of dollars in military aid sent during the Biden years. But Kiev rejected that idea. Now under this new deal, Ukraine will not owe any debt to the US for past military assistance. In return, Washington gets long-term economic partnership and a potential share in Ukraine's future mineral boom. Now you might be wondering why now and what's Trump's real agenda? This is a big question. This deal comes after months of tensions between President Trump and President Zelensky, and even a freeze on US military aid to Ukraine. President Trump has criticized the blank check approach of the Biden era and made it very clear that he wanted something in return, quote unquote. Now this deal is being positioned as that something. Trump's team is selling it to the American public, American people, as a win-win situation. The US gets access to billions in mineral wealth, and Ukraine gets long-term involvement and investment, possibly worth 175 billion in coming years. But there is a twist. There is always a twist. Trump didn't get the 500 billion access he wanted. Ukraine negotiated down and kept ownership of all its resources. So while the US can help develop the profit from these resources, ownership stays with Kiev. But the question is, what exactly is in Ukraine's soil? Why is Trump so interested in it? Think lithium, cobalt, graphite, the stuff that powers electric cars, satellites, and advanced weapons. Ukraine has significant untapped resources, reserves of rare earth elements. Add to that oil and gas potential, and you are looking at one of Europe's most resource-rich countries, if it can stabilize. The deal includes funding not just for mineral projects, but also for oil, gas, and related infrastructure. And all profits for the first decade will be reinvested directly into Ukraine, though this part might be formalized later through a supplementary agreement. So this is still in question. Interestingly, this agreement changed the language of the United States of America towards Russia. This is interesting to note. The tone of US statement was unusually tough on Russia. It referred to Russia's full-scale invasion, a phrase Trump had often avoided in favor of calling it a conflict. And the Treasury made it clear, no person or country that aided Russia will benefit from Ukraine's reconstruction, a not so subtle warning to Moscow and perhaps China as well. But what's the catch in this whole US-Ukraine minerals deal? This is very important to know. While the deal opens the door for future US military aid, including air defense systems, there is still no firm security guarantee. This is something Ukraine's president wanted. Trump remains cautious about long-term military entanglements, meaning the US can technically walk away anytime it finds soothing. So while this deal strengthens economic ties, Ukraine's security still lacks the kind of hard assurances Kiev and President Zelensky wants. And what about Europe? There were fears that this agreement might hurt Ukraine's chances of joining the European Union, its ambition of joining the European Union, especially if it gave too much priority to the United States. However, the deal clearly says it won't interfere with Ukraine's EU ambitions. And if needed, the US agrees to renegotiate in good faith as well. That is a smart move. It keeps doors open on both sides of the Atlantic for both the countries, Ukraine as well as USA. So the bottom line here is that in the middle of a war, Ukraine just signed a deal that secures its minerals, attracts American investment, and opens the door to rebuilding without giving up its sovereignty. For the US, it's a way to profit, stay entangled, engaged, and still pull back military. It's not a peace treaty, but it might just be the blueprint for the next phase of this war. Now imagine inheriting a thriving shop, customers coming in, money flowing, everything running smoothly. Now imagine that just weeks after you take over, sales starts dropping, shelves look emptier, and people start asking, what happened? That's pretty much what's going on in the United States economy right now. In a surprising turn, the American economy shrank by 0.3% in the first 3 months of 2025. That's a big deal. It's the first contraction in 3 years, and it came just 100 days after Donald Trump returned to the White House. So the question is, what caused it? According to the US Commerce Department, the slowdown was driven by 3 key things. What are these 3 key things? Number 1, a sharp increase in imports. Second, a dip in customer spending. And third, a noticeable drop in the government spending. Markets had actually expected slight growth, around 0.4%. So now this is a real shock. Now let's rewind a bit. When Trump took office in January, he inherited a fairly strong economy from Joe Biden, the former president of US. Despite inflation and high interest rates, the US had been growing steadily. That was a fine situation, but Trump quickly started rolling out his own strategies, including tariffs on imports from key trade partners, his own economics matrices. Businesses, unsure of what's coming next, started slowing down, shutting down. Wall Street reacted too, with markets turning volatile, a scene not seen since the early COVID-19 virus days. Yet it's all not bad news. Businesses' investment jumped by nearly 22%, especially in equipment and infrastructure. That's a good sign. And a key measure of economic health, that is customer and private investment excluding government and exports actually grew at 3%, slightly better than last quarter. Still, the overall GDP, gross domestic product, fell. That is a bigger metrics. So who to blame? Trump, being classic Trump, says, not me, it's Biden. In a cabinet meeting, he said, and I quote, that's Biden, that's not Trump. On social media, he doubled down, saying the damage was already done before he took office. He said, and I quote again, this has nothing to do with tariffs. The boom will come. Be patient. He wants Americans to be patient. But Democrats aren't buying this whole thing. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries fired back, and he said, and I quote, this is not Joe Biden's economy, Donald. It's your economy. It's the Trump economy. This is what he said. Meanwhile, Trump's comments about Americans needing fewer toys or adjusting to higher prices didn't exactly inspire confidence in general public. He said, maybe the children will have 2 dolls instead of 30. At the same time, the Senate narrowly blocked a resolution to cancel his tariffs, though some Republicans broke ranks and voted with Democrats against Trump. Senator Rand Paul warned that if the economy shrink again, more Republicans might start publicly opposing Trump's policies. So here is the big picture for you. Trump's tariffs heavily, America's first economic strategy, is already shaking markets and businesses. That is the bottom line. While he insists that the real impact of his policies hasn't kicked in yet, This early contraction of the economy raises serious questions about what lies ahead in Trump's economy. Is this a temporary dip or a start of a new trend? For now, Trump is asking Americans to be quote-unquote patient. But with shelves thinning and markets wobbling, patience may be the one thing that the US economy can't afford to lose. As Pakistan raises its voice against India on the global stage, the ground beneath its own feet is slipping fast. The Human Rights Commission of Pakistan, HRCP, just dropped its annual report, and believe me, it reads like a tragic novel. From political suppression to police brutality, from vanishing citizens to terror attacks, the list of failures is long and damning. But what's more telling, even as Pakistan tries to point fingers at India over diplomatic tensions, it cannot seem to manage the chaos brewing within its own borders, its own country. Let's start with Pakistan occupied Kashmir, POK. You may recall massive protests last year over soaring electricity prices and unaffordable floor. Now, rather than addressing the public's demand, the government cracked down hard, really hard. What did the government do? Mass arrests, police violence, and even fatalities followed. And in a bizarre twist, a prison break at Central Jail Poonch led to 19 prisoners escaping, all thanks to a smuggled pistol. Yes, a real jailbreak using pistol in 2024. And while the Pakistan government tries to control POK with brutal force, it's also targeting minorities. The Ahmadiyya community, already declared non-Muslim by the state, suffered violent attacks, desecration of place of worship, and constant fear. It's year 2025 and the entire community still lives under threat simply for their beliefs. The report doesn't stop there. In Balochistan, the reality is even grimmer. Activists have long warned that the region resembles much of a military occupation. Checkpoints are everywhere, locals are interrogated, and journalists, well, are silenced or worse, gunned down. One prominent case included the abduction of Kashmiri journalist named Ahmad Farhad, snatched from the capital of Pakistan, Islamabad. It's not just local moments crying out. Even international watchdogs like Amnesty International says the human rights situation in the state of Pakistan, and I quote, is alarming. This is what they say, alarming. And with over 1,166 terrorist attacks in 2024 alone, resulting in some 2,500 deaths, it's clear that Pakistan's internal security has spiraled out of control. The HRCP bluntly says the state has failed, and yet, amid all this, Pakistan continues its obsession with India. Following the recent Pahalgam terror attack, India took a bold step, closing its airspace to Pakistani aircrafts. The result? Well, massive financial losses for Pakistan's airlines and cargo routes, potentially running into billions of US dollars. And frankly, it's a move that signals India's refusal to tolerate cross-border terrorism, while Pakistan is still figuring out how to deal with militants back at home. Now back to politics. The HRCP slammed Pakistan's 2024 elections as compromised. Former Prime Minister Imran Khan's party was cornered, and several repressive laws were passed in a rush in the parliament. Also, the social media platform X is still banned, and 6 journalists were killed last year just for doing their jobs. All this points to a sobering picture, a state at war with its own people. As Pakistan tries to rally international support, international sympathy rather, this report asks a deeper question. How can you fix your foreign policy if your own house is on fire? Israel is burning, literally. This week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared a national emergency as the country battles its worst wildfires in over 10 years, over a decade. Huge clouds of smoke choked the skies near Jerusalem, major highways were shut down, and terrified residents had to evacuate their homes as flames drew dangerously close. This is the situation. The fire erupted as dry weather, scorching heat, and strong western winds combined to form the perfect storm that Israel is facing at this point of time. Firefighters have been overwhelmed with work. So far, 23 people have been injured, including 2 pregnant women and 2 infants, mostly from smoke inhalation and burns. And this isn't just a local crisis anymore. Netanyahu himself warned that the flames could reach the heart of Jerusalem if not controlled in time. He said, and I quote him here, "We are now in a state of national emergency, not just a local one," adding that defending Jerusalem is the priority of the country. Emergency respondents and soldiers and aircraft have been all deployed, but even with everything in the air and on the ground, weather conditions are making firefighting efforts almost impossible. Actually, they are returning the efforts. Fire chief said bluntly, "Our aircrafts can't do anything right now. Our goal is to save lives, but here is the bigger picture. This isn't just an Israeli problem. In the last few years, we have seen unprecedented wildfires break out across the world, across the globe. From Greece to Canada, from California to Australia, the climate is getting hotter, drier, and more unpredictable. And with each degree of warning, wildfires become more intense and harder to stop and even more frequent. In fact, 2025 is already on track to be one of the hottest years of record, and fire seasons are now starting earlier and ending later. In Israel, this week's blaze is a stark reminder of that. Authorities have also started investigating possible cases and causes of arson, with at least one person arrested in this whole assumption. But even if foul play is involved, the core problem remains. We are entering an era where climate disasters are becoming new normal. As this Jerusalem Tel Aviv highway lies closed and emergency sirens echo through the hills, Israel is facing the flames head on. But this is more than just a fire. It is a warning, not for Israel alone, but for the world. And the world better start paying their attention. I hope that the situation gets resolved quickly and everyone remains safe. And that's all I have for you on the show tonight. I will see you tomorrow. Until then, take care and good night.